If you want to refresh your GoodReader app, this slide deck is in GoodReader. There's also a paper copy in front of you if you want to follow along on the paper copy or take some notes as you go.
What folder is it in?
Should be in the County Health Committee folder. So same folder as the packet.
Okay.
All right, so we'll start off. A couple of changes from the project workflow from last time. You'll see that the renovate replace decision and the site decision are no longer peach. They are now orange, which means those would be actionable items by the full county board instead of the committee. Additionally, there's a new decision point for the county board, and that will be the project labor agreement and MBE goals once we get to that point in the process. As we have been for the last couple meetings, as we work through the decision for project delivery methodology, that's where we are today. So just as I outlined, you'll see that the committee has an action item which is on today's agenda, and then there are 6 future decisions that are policy decisions of the county board. Many of the work streams of the various components between the management team, the architect, the civil engineer, and the construction manager, those are essentially project deliverables that will come about throughout the course of the project. Last meeting, Ms. Allison asked for an estimated timeline, and we've broken that up for you into various phases of the project with some approximate dates. The dates get a little bit more squishy or flexible the further out we go, because it'll all be dependent upon process. But we have a pre-phase, a phase 1, phase 2, 3, 4, and 5. The future slides in the deck will go into a significant more detail about some responsibilities for each one of those slides. The estimated timeline here shows that we started in December of 20, and construction would ideally start, whether we're renovating the existing structure or we're building a new structure. Ideally would start in late 2022 or early 2023. As we work through the various responsibilities within each phase, you'll see things that are color-coded. You'll see orange for the policy-making team, which is yourselves and the full board, green, which is the management team, and blue, which is the design team. And so the first project phase is the pre-phase. The timeline for that was December of 2019 through December of last year. It is complete. This format will be consistent across each one of the several next slides for each one of the phases. It'll list the responsibilities of the design team and the management team and the actions that the policymaking team has or will need to take in the future. So this here is a past tense because it's already complete, and that is you appropriated money in the current fiscal year budget in the health department for A&E services. Our responsibility on the management side was to obviously put those in the budget that you subsequently approved, and because we don't have a design team yet, there are no responsibilities of the design team. In phase 1 of the project, which started this spring and will roll through mid-late summer of this year, and we're currently in progress, we'll have the committee here selecting a project delivery method. You'll continue, as you already have, continue to provide us some feedback on some of those desired scope of work items for the design team that they will then work on and complete during phase 2. And then towards the end of the phase timeline for this phase, the full board will award the contracts for the design team services. It's the management team's responsibilities to provide the analysis on the delivery models, which we've been doing for the last couple meetings. When the RFPs come back, to score and recommend a design team to you for your approval. And then to continue to take that feedback from you and to integrate that into the design team's scope of works. An example of that might be the renovate versus replace evaluation. Another example might be, as Mr. Renaud suggested a couple of meetings ago, that we potentially evaluate having dedicated office space for other county operations, whether that be something from the county clerk's office or seasonally, today being tax day, for the treasurer's office as another point of collection, say, for property taxes. So those are a couple of examples on how we might do that. And we'll work those into the scope of work for the design team. Obviously, since we don't have a design team yet, their responsibility in this phase is to be responding to the RFP that will go out on the street. And once the design team is assembled, that is our team of experts. They are the architect that will do the evaluations there, and then make the design for whatever path we go down. The civil engineer will have the same responsibilities for any site improvements that need to be made. And then the construction manager, at risk, presuming you approve the recommended delivery method later on the agenda, the construction manager will be looking at it, things from a constructability standpoint and providing their expertise. So next would be phase 2. This will kick off approximately Labor Day, or whenever we're able to execute contracts with the design team members after your approvals by the full board. It probably will take through the winter and maybe into early spring next year. Throughout that time frame and that period, we will schedule at multiple meetings of the committee what we'll for now going to call gate checking events, where the design team can come out and come back and report out findings to you on some of those evaluations that they're looking to do. At the culmination at the end of this phase, you'll be making a recommendation to the full board on the renovate versus replace decision, and ideally the site decision. Obviously, if we choose to renovate, the site decision step can go away. If we choose to replace, then there is a decision to be made about location. And should a majority of the committee and a majority of the board want to look at a different location, then obviously this phase could get extended out by several months as we evaluate potential sites and bring back a recommendation for you on what would be the best site for us to move forward with. Again, that stays on track, or gets a little truncated if we choose to renovate, or if you choose to replace and you choose to replace on the existing campus location. And then also during this phase, we expect to have this committee working with the Finance, Audit, and Legislative Affairs Committee to talk about funding options based on the preliminary budget numbers that'll come from the design team. And then obviously we'll have that county board vote for renovation versus replacement and the site decision. It's going to be the management team's responsibility to provide data and manage the work scope and expectations, and to develop various funding options for the two committees to evaluate. The design team will be doing that discovery analysis, providing the options for sites, buildings. They'll present various design options. They'll conduct process mapping and service level mapping exercises. They'll conduct review and feasibility and costing at multiple steps in this phase. And then they'll also be responsible for developing a more detailed project schedule and budget once we get a little bit further into things. For phase 3, we would expect that to start in the spring of 22 and go through spring and summer of next year. Again, we'll continue with the design team to come in and do some regularly scheduled gate checking events for you to keep you informed of where they're at and what the progress is. At this point, we'll be in a position where we'll start to secure and finalize the any lease arrangements and agreements that we'll have with stakeholder tenants. We've talked about that before. We've got several stakeholders that are currently partners of the health department and have in our leasing space in the current health department. Those we've have indicated will likely be enhanced with renovations or a new building, so we'll have a need to do that. This is also the phase where we'll talk about and present the project labor agreement, and where you'll set goals for both the enterprise and the workforce components of MBE, DBE, WBE, and VBE. So that's minority, disadvantaged women, and veteran business enterprises. For everyone's benefit, the enterprise goals are for subcontractors and suppliers that are owned by or have a majority ownership of one of those categories. The workforce goals would be the actual construction workforce on the job site. Obviously, the board will then approve or vote on and approve the recommendations that come out of the committee. Our responsibilities leading up to that, obviously, is to finalize those agreements so that we can get them into position for you to vote on, and the same thing with the project labor agreement and the goals for minority participation in the enterprise and workforce side. The design team is going to continue to refine the detailed design and continue to go through those various feasibility and costing exercises that they go through at every step. In phase 4, which we would expect to be in the fall and early winter of next year, we'll get to a place where the detailed design is complete, the construction documents are complete, and the guaranteed maximum price, or GMP, will be set. And then the design team will be coordinating the bidding process with our finance department for the subcontractor and supplier bids. That will get us to a point where you and the board will award those bid packages to the subcontractors and suppliers. We'll finalize the funding mechanism based on what that final guaranteed maximum price is, which will be something that both the committee and the board approve. While the design team is doing its work and leading up to those votes that you will have, we'll obviously be finalizing the funding decision recommendation. We'll be in a position to sign off on the GMP, and we'll be participating in all of the pre-bid meetings with the subcontractors and suppliers to answer questions and to make it clear to them what our expectations are for enterprise and workforce minority participation for the project. And then obviously we'll be preparing the documentation to get us to a point where you can actually vote on those things. And then in phase 5, which right now we've got slated to start in early, late 22, early 23, and we anticipate could be an 18-month construction cycle. That obviously is a little bit in flux because we're so early in the process, and so we'll adjust that as we move forward. But right now we're anticipating an 18-month construction cycle. The committee here will have an action of monitoring progress. We will, when as needed, we'll bring forward for you to review and approve change orders. And then assuming that we set things up the same way we did with the museum and the nursing home construction, if a change order goes above a certain dollar threshold, then it would actually require county board approval. So we would have $3 thresholds for change orders. One would be within my spending authority, One would be at the committee level, and a third would be at the county board level, each of those increasing in dollar value. We'll be monitoring the project progress as well, and the MBE goal achievement. We'll be participating in regular construction project status meetings for both the museum and the nursing home. Those were weekly on-site meetings. So we would fully expect that to be the case here, and that's pretty standard in the construction industry for a project like this. On the design team side, they will move into construction mode. On the architect component of the design team, they're going to respond to what are called RFIs, or requests for information from the subcontractors and suppliers. That happens on every project. And when appropriate, the architect will prepare construction documents for change orders as they may be needed. And then obviously at the end of the project, we'll have project closeout and turnover to us, the owners. The next 4 slides, if you are more oriented to seeing all those, everything that I just laid out, but more geared more towards who has what. The next 2 slides are for the Policymaker team. There's roughly 20 items between the 2 pages or the 2 slides that the policymakers have responsibility for. There's roughly 12 action items that the management team is responsible for, and then there's roughly 10 items that the design team has responsibility for. So exact same information, just presenting it in a little bit different format depending on how your brain might be wired. Madam Chair, pretty detailed walkthrough of what the schedule looks like, what the various how we've broken this project up into some phases, and what everyone's responsibilities are going to be in each one of those phases. Obviously, as we move through this, we'll evolve. This is not a static document, as evidenced by the fact that we talked about revising the schedule and revising the budget at multiple turns once we get the design team in place. So with that, as it relates to the timeline, I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee might have.
Are there any questions?
I have a question. This is Kate.
Okay. Go ahead, Kate.
Sorry, I can barely hear you.
Go ahead, Kate.
Something that I don't really see in here that I've been wondering about is, if we're making the decision to, I guess if we decide to replace the building and then we therefore are looking at a location, I feel like something that we're missing as part of this step is who and how are we going to have kind of an analysis. I know that, we have a lot of data that's collected from the health department. I was just wondering if part of the design and architecture scope of work was going to include a public health expert who could do some sort of compilation and analysis of data. Because if we're talking about where we need to locate, how are they going to make that decision if I'm assuming an architect doesn't have an expertise in public health?
Great question, Kate. Where that expertise will lie is evaluating the health department's current customer base, what zip codes they live in, potentially how they come to the health department. So are they receiving their services at the health department or not? And if they are receiving the services at the health department, are they arriving via public transportation or personal vehicle or bicycle or walking? In terms of proximity, we'll be able to use some GIS technology to then map that data, and then looking at the the public health data that Monica and her team have already collected, that will be able to drive that discussion.
And at what step does that come in?
Well, that would come into play should you first choose to replace the building instead of renovating it, and then should you choose that the current location is not acceptable for any variety of reasons. And so I would say at that step in the process is when we would go through that.
Scope of work?
Well, no, I would say because if the committee and the board are adamant that they really want to renovate the existing building and not replace it, which will likely be a less construction cost, but may not be an effective use of service delivery within the existing structure, but yet to be determined. Then the site decision is really a moot point.
Right. Okay.
So I would say once you decide if you're going to renovate or replace, then we would start to go through down the path of, okay, is the current location the best location for the facility?
Okay. And then part of that decision to renovate versus replace, I'm assuming, is also going to include financial information and possible funding sources?
It will be part of the conversation, but finalizing the actual funding source comes at a later stage. But as we continue to refine the estimated cost of construction for either one of those options, how we're going to pay for it will definitely be part of the conversation.
Okay. And then, sorry, one more question. I like the manager at risk idea. I'm not sure what the big differences are between using a manager at risk with a design build versus a manager at risk with the integrated. Can you explain the differences between those two?
Sure. One, the design build, we really you almost start construction very early in the process because you're building it as you're designing it, so that the architectural portion of the design team and the contractor part of the design team are highly synced together, and will literally go through that process. So that it does conflict a little bit with the committee's stated desire thus far is to be more exhaustive in your renovation and replacement analysis and decision. Whereas CM at risk for this project, we have the ability to start construction once all that exhaustive analysis that you've asked for has been completed and you've made your decisions on at the various points in the process. The CM at risk then has the opportunity to have input and weigh in on the constructability and the costing of the various options that are being considered. I would say for this, how we're going about this project, those would be the two primary differences.
Kate, anything else?
Anything else,
No,
Kate?
thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Linda?
Question about this. So I know quick question about this. So I know we talked about being able to do an analysis and figure out who's utilizing the services of the health department, where they're at within the community. What about, which I know we've talked about a little bit before, about being heavily weighted to where the location is today. What about exploring or getting any other data around others who maybe would be beneficial or would benefit from services of the health department who maybe don't take advantage of those today? I know it almost feels like we're benchmarking against ourselves a little bit in that data. So I'm wondering if there's anything external to not only who's utilizing it today, but who could potentially.
Yes, we'll have to think about exactly how we could potentially model that, but I think that's a valuable set of data for us to collect and then bring back as we go through this evaluation process. I think a little bit about how we would try and collect that data, because we'll obviously have to make some assumptions and kind of analyze what those assumptions look like, and but I feel confident that we could do some sort of analysis along those lines.
Linda, I think Linda was next.
Once again, I just want to mention that I very strongly feel we need to consider having an owner's representative. And I have now, since the last meeting, been told that actually the county had an owner's representative on the Headington Oaks project, and that this was somebody who lived out of state, came in for monthly meetings or whatever, and did presentations. And not only because of my own experience with this, but I just think that someone who is well credentialed, an out-of-town expert who understands construction, does not have local relationships. So in other words, is not going to overlook something because the next project they work on will be with someone locally. So their interest is more in that than it is in protecting, I think, the owner. I also think that once you do value engineering, you can recoup a fair amount of the salary for the owner's representative. And I certainly understand the temptation not to want to spend the money, but I feel like you should do in a publicly funded project what you do in your own home to make sure that the quality, the design, and the construction is as perfect as you can get it. So again, I realize that the construction manager at risk model that we are deciding on today does not prevent us from having an owner's rep, but in talking with two people who are retired in the construction business, both of them said that they think this is not a bad idea. When you don't have a smaller entity that is more intimately involved with what the project is. So I just want to bring that up again. And the other question I have is, I'm really curious to know what the questions will be in the selection of the design team, and also what the scoring system is.
So a couple of
You don't need to make them public.
no, well, we won't be because that would give everyone an unfair advantage.
Exactly.
But a couple things to Ms. Daly's points. I absolutely agree that that an owner's rep may be, this project may be best suited for that. I think once we get a little bit further into the project, we'll be in a better position to make that decision. Like for example, if we choose to renovate, the scope may not be such that we need it, or it may be. If we replace, then I think it's absolutely a more serious consideration. What we will do is we have the evaluation process that we used for both the on the construction side for the museum. As we did not select the architect for the museum, we inherited or were assigned a contract for the museum for the architectural services. The museum was largely designed already by the time we got involved in that project, and the referendum had passed. But we did conduct the bidding process for the construction. So we'll look at those documents, and then also for the nursing home, because we went through this exact process with the nursing home. We have a good detailed set of evaluation criteria and questions that we will ask the prospective respondents that get shortlisted in the RFP process in each one of the disciplines. to evaluate who is the most qualified for to be be a part of our design team for this project. Just to remind, for everyone's benefit, architectural and engineering services are professional services. So that means we first select who we believe is the most qualified and is the best fit for us in this project, and then we talk about how much that contract is going to cost us. You do not base your decision on professional service selection on cost at any point in time. And then for the construction management at risk, that's largely pre-construction services. We'll treat that the same way, and so that we'll have a qualified base selection process where we're looking at who's the most qualified, who's the best fit for us for this project, and then we'll negotiate the value of that contract with the preferred vendor in each one of those disciplines.
Just a second. Honestly, I think we should add this to the timeline somewhere where we think this is going to fit in, where we're going to start talking about that. So we'll get that updated on the timeline and have that as a discussion item, okay? And then you had another question, Linda?
Follow up.
Okay.
So then, after you make the selection through the quality-based selection process, do you utilize the Capital Development Board categories to determine the negotiation for the price?
We have not in the past, but there's nothing that would preclude us from doing that on this project if that was everyone's desire.
Because, of course, quality-based selection says you don't necessarily take the lowest bid, but it also doesn't mean you can't negotiate based on what other construction projects, public ones like the Capital Development Board, feel is appropriate and that we are not being overcharged.
Correct.
Thank you, Linda. Jennifer, did you have a question?
Mine actually just went back to Rachel's comment. I think some of that information could probably be found in the needs assessment, couldn't it? As far as location, just as a refresher. She had asked about, looking at who may be in need of services versus who's currently utilizing them. So I think that's a document we could reference for that information.
Great, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Steve?
I have another question.
Just a second, we got Steve.
Sorry, I can't hear anyone else except for Scott. Let me know when it's my turn.
Okay. I guess I like the input from all of the members so far. It's been really good inputs. I had a follow-up question on the owner's representative. I appreciate Linda's knowledge and experience with that because that's an area that I have not personally dealt with. I've dealt with projects before, but not with an owner's rep. So any education there is well appreciated. But from a timeline, when's the appropriate time to slot in considering an owner's rep? Can you move forward with the design team and not get set back later with a date saying, okay, we do or don't want an owner's rep?
We've got some flexibility there. We actually chose on the museum project to use an owner's rep just before we actually went to bid, and that was that delivery model was a design bid build delivery model. So there was no CM at risk for the museum project. That was a big reason why we chose to use an owner's rep, plus the complexity and the size and scope of that project. So I would say that anywhere within probably phase 2 or even phase 3, we would have the flexibility to do that evaluation. Phase 2 again is what will happen after the design team is assembled, and we would start all the data collection and discovery analysis by the design team. Once we get through that, we might have a better sense of just exactly what the scope's going to look like and how complex the project will or will not be, and that would probably be a factor in that drives that decision-making process for you. You could also maybe look at inserting that into phase 3 as we get maybe a little bit deeper into that project, and you've made the decision at the end of phase 2 to renovate or replace. So I think you'd be in good position in either phase 2 or phase 3 to do that evaluation.
Okay, thank you for that. The next item, and I think it comes off a comment you made, Scott, referencing Rob Renault's ask earlier in a meeting about scoping in the initial scope, all of the potential services, and I know Linda's asked for a document you provided, I think, last meeting, the mandatory services that the county provides, but kind of, I guess, pull the other services you made the reference of, if it's the county clerk or other. I don't want this to be exhaustive, but at least put that in scope. And then the last piece that was brought up by Rachel was making sure we're looking at the entire county from a standpoint, not just the current clients and the people, the user data from the health department today. Yeah, that's one set of data, but quite frankly, in my view, that's biased because that's data based on where it's at and what services we offer and how we perform. I want to see the data for the entire county for the needs for WIC, for dental, immunizations, all of the services that we provide mapped out. That will help us, I think, better as a county committee decide how we're best providing services. So, I mean, to me, the simple answer is, or the simple goal is to provide the best services we can provide at the most cost effective. And the service delivery method and the location tie to that directly. So I just kind of want to expand on comments that other committee members have made. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Kate?
Go ahead, Kate.
Oh, hi. One of the things that concerns me about the construction manager at risk model, especially if they're sharing in the savings, I've been involved in a project where it was cheaper to put in, for example, old style HID lighting. I was not involved in this project, but once the project was done, I wish I had been a little bit more nosy about kind of looking at what was going on with this building project, because a brand new building was built with lighting that needed to be replaced, for example. So I don't know that I want to. There's some costs, or there's some benefits, and to building LEED. I don't know if that's the right fit for us, but I do want to be very conscious of short-term savings versus long-term savings, whereas, putting in LEDs right now is going to be more, cost-effective in the long term, even though it's going to cost a little bit more in the short term. So cost savings are great for a building project, but I also want to look at some of the long-term costs of the decisions that are made. And so if a construction manager at risk is trying to save money on the project for us, I think we need to consider what those long-term costs are and whether or not some of the upfront costs are worth it versus our long-term costs, for example.
Okay. Thanks, Kate. Any other questions or comments? I'm going to move to Brian and Dr. Armour over there. Do you have any comments that you want to make, or? Yeah. Do you want to come up to the mic there?
You hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Sorry, I'm Brian Gully. I'm the Director of Finance at the Health Department. I'm filling in for Monica. She's taking a well-deserved vacation this week. No, I think Scott did great. The one point she wanted me to make was that the costs were already included in our budget for this year. So, and I think Scott touched on that in that one pre-phase. So,
Okay. Appreciate you being here, Brian.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. No more discussion. We'll move on to the action item. Okay. Our action item is for the project delivery model. Can I have a motion to get that on the floor? We have Eden and Betty. Okay, Scott?
All right, thanks, Madam Chair. So there's an agenda briefing in the packet that is kind of a culmination of all the materials that we've provided you over the last several meetings as it relates to the type of project delivery model that is being considered. And today we recommend that we move forward with a construction manager at risk for this project with the integrated project delivery overlaid on top of that. We haven't talked about the integrated project delivery in quite some time. We actually talked about it at the very first meeting where we started talking about the campus, but it's graphically shown on the last page of your packet. It is the red line on the chart where you have the greatest opportunity to impact cost and function capabilities early on in the project, while the cost of those changes are very low, and where the further out you go in the project, cost to make changes goes up, and the ability to have impact goes down. So we would look to combine those two, as we kind of talked about, I think, at your last meeting, and there are multiple benefits to using the CM at risk model, including faster delivery, financial certainty, the collaborative environment that we will expect and demand of the design team, improved quality in that you've got the CM engaged early on in the process, so they're not walking in on bid day with a set of plans going, well, we think the building would go together better this way instead of how the architect designed it. Those conversations can be had throughout the entire design process, which leads to the collaboration that I talked about. It also allows for the scope of work and the budget to be well aligned. And as we saw with the nursing home compared to the museum, we had significantly fewer, both in quantity and in value, change orders. The museum had well over 100 change orders and several $1 million worth. The nursing home had fewer than 30, and the dollar value was significantly smaller. And when you're talking about a $40+ million project, to have that few number of change orders is a testament to having that type of delivery model in place. Also allows us to have that input on who will be subcontractors and the suppliers for our project. Some of the disadvantages, though, of going with this model that we laid out is, the pool of general contractors that provide construction management at risk services. It tends to be a little bit more limited, but we do know that there are several in our community, and so that we feel fortunate that we should get a good group of general contractors that do offer those services. We fully acknowledge that there's going to be more work by the owner up front. We're prepared to do that from the management team standpoint. We believe that having multiple bid packages produced by the design team, it does increase work for us. It doesn't necessarily increase risk for us because the way we did it with the nursing home and the way we will do it here is we will assign that work to the CM at risk, and they will take on that risk. And it'll be our responsibility to select and award contracts to the best vendors. I think for a variety of reasons, the CM at risk is the best delivery model for this project, regardless of which fork in the road we'll take down down in the future in terms of renovating or replacing the building. We'll once we cross that bridge, we'll have that decision made. But regardless of which way we go, this delivery model is best suited for the project. I'm happy to try and answer any questions. Just, I guess, one additional thing, going back to Ms. Pastucha's comments at the end of the discussion of the last item. LEED in many aspects is just well integrated into current construction methodologies. So we have an unwritten policy that a project of this size and scope we would want to have be LEED silver or better. That's a medium grade of LEED certification. That is levels actually become pretty common practice in commercial construction at this point in time. There will be other decision factors that will come forward throughout the process. Do you want to be, one potential would be, do we want to do a green roof, or how green does it want to be? Do we want to be zero waste? Do we want to be, zero carbon footprint, so it generates its own energy? Those types of decisions will could come out in the design process, and those will be decisions that you'll need to consider and make. When we built the nursing home, we absolutely looked and considered long-term operating costs, because that is a requirement of LEED, and we would absolutely consider doing that for this project as well. So with that, happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Any other questions? Eden?
I'm just going off that. I mean, can we actually be LEED certified? I'm not sure with public buildings how that works.
We can. The museum is LEED certified, and when it was built, the nursing home was the first publicly owned skilled nursing facility to be LEED Gold in the United States.
Is that something we as a committee can ask for, that we go for LEED
Absolutely.
Gold certification?
Yeah, and platinum would be the highest possible rating if that is the desire of the committee and the board. Absolutely, we would build that into the scope.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay, moving on, we're at miscellaneous. Any comments before I make a few closing remarks? No? So over the last week or so, Steve Ricker sat in a meeting with me, with Scott and Monica, to talk a little bit about, how the service delivery model and all that. And I just wanted to acknowledge Steve and his participation in this with me, to work towards us coming to a consensus on this. This committee has really done a lot of good work in the last four or 5 years. We took on the Headington Oaks project, and we all came to a consensus after that, and I just appreciate everybody's working together with this committee, and some of the great work that we're doing. So I look forward to making data-driven decisions and making the right decisions for, Peoria County residents. So, any other comments? Okay, then we'll be adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. I'm going to hang up now.